Well, thank you all. We continue with what originally was our third panel, and I give the floor to Mr. Ron Manners. He's coming. He's an entrepreneur and an intellectual entrepreneur, and he comes from Australia. Mr. Manners, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon, friends. I'm just talking about, the whole session's about competitiveness and the need to be competitive in this very competitive world. And I'll just talk about the Australian experiment that we've had with competitiveness and how we've lost our edge to some degree. It's a complex story, but I'll confine it to a very short story in view of the time constraints today. Australia has many things in common with perhaps Argentina or Venezuela or Ukraine. Those four countries are very rich in natural resources. We should have the most wealthiest of people in the world, but something's gone wrong, and Australia really has probably the highest rate of household debt in the world. So what's gone wrong? How come we're closing factories? How come we're losing so much employment? We've got the announced departure and the closure of the General Motors factory in Australia, Ford Australia are closing, Toyota Australia are closing, SPC Ardmona, a wholly owned Coca-Cola subsidiary of the canned fruit processing, they're closing, and a whole string of announcements being made in similar fashion. Something's gone wrong, and they keep blaming the high Australian dollar, but that's not the real reason. The real reason, in my view, is weak management. Somehow we're lacking leadership in the business community. I know leadership is really not popular. Leadership, by definition, is disruptive, and it's not the best way to become popular. So that's why we haven't got a lot of leadership. The management in Australia over the last 20 years has been so happy to exercise the soft options of signing away a lot of independence and management decisions that should be made by them, that they walk away from these, and they've taken the conciliatory option in every time and allowed vested interest groups such as the labour unions to outsmart them at every turn. The various steps in this development has been made obvious to us all now by only 3 individuals in Australia, and they've been working independently, but now they're talking to each other, and they've delved deeply into finding out just what has gone wrong. And to our great benefit in Australia, we now have access via the web. These people have given access to the web to these things called enterprise agreements that weak management has signed. They've signed over, it's the way business is done in the larger groups in Australia. And when you look at the agreements that have been signed by management, it really makes you weep. And if I believed in firing squads, for instance, I could see the managers, the people that signed those agreements, they should be great candidates for the firing squad. But if you could imagine any manager worth anything at all ever signing an agreement that, for instance, makes it impossible to dismiss a worker who is not performing. As simple as that. Could you imagine anyone signing an agreement that says they cannot bring in any new machinery to the factory to make it more efficient without permission of the labour union? Could you agree to signing an agreement that gives the right for every worker to have 5 additional days of holiday per year so that they could go and donate blood, knowing that they're not going to donate blood at all. Could you imagine signing an agreement that forces that company to pay the wages of union officials who are there in the building only to cause disruption? And I could go on all day with just examples of these clauses that are now available for us all to see. And you might say, how could this go on so long? It went on for so long because these companies, when they got into trouble, financially trouble, they went to the government and demanded more government subsidies so that they wouldn't dismiss 5,000 workers, which is absolutely not what politicians want to see. They'd be losing 5,000 voters probably. However, that's gone on now. I think like most governments, we've run out of money and we can't pay those subsidies, so there's a reluctance for government to keep paying those subsidies. You might say this is not a problem if the unions haven't got control. The unions can't do much damage, but you could imagine offshore oil drilling rigs and offshore production rigs totally under the control of labour unions, because everything has to be shipped in, the people, the commodities, everything has to be shipped out. So total control. Most of our major ports in Australia totally controlled by the unions. So control has been signed over to them. So the real thing is, what is Australia doing now that the remedies, now that the problem has become obvious? What are we doing to solve the problem? Well, business managements don't appear to be doing much at all. But there is a couple of signs. For instance, Leighton, Australia's biggest contracting company, is being currently really being taken over by their major shareholder, the Spanish major shareholder, which will be good, and I think they'll purge the company of some of this. Really, it's corrupt behaviour between management and unions. The two major construction companies in Australia have, under pressure from the unions, brought in clauses that even the smallest of subcontractors working for them must completely unionise their workforce, even if that subcontractor only employs 3 people. Now, those 3 people don't really want to be members of a union, but it's compulsory under the scheme of things. Surprisingly, we're getting more leadership out of the government. State governments, some of the state governments and the federal government are now contemplating, and they've brought in rules so that absolutely no contracts and no tenders will be received from construction companies who involve themselves in these corrupt management and union deals. And that'll break something of that comfortable deal that's been going on. So that's my short ray of optimistic sunshine, that there is some hope for the country, and we'll get back on a competitive footing, because Australia's got a fantastic future if we learn how to handle our affairs in such a way. Now, for anyone who wants more information, we've got a link to a whole string of information and case studies on this on the mancal.org website, and Barbara and her team have also got access to that thing, so that's there for anyone who would like further information. Thank you for your time.